Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is John Campea, and this is a companion video. What are companion videos? Well, I'm awfully glad that you asked to see every day on the John Campea Show, Monday through Friday. We take the second half of the show to take live comments and questions you guys sent in. However, we don't always have time to get around to all those live comments and questions, especially over the Christmas break, where we took a couple of days off and we really got a big pile of questions to get caught up on. So we're a little bit behind, but we're going to get caught up here in a companion video. And I just want to say, I hope all of you guys have had a wonderful Christmas season. We're now into the New Year's season. We are recording this on Sunday, January the 3rd. I'm recording this at halftime. I really want to be watching that the Washington-Philadelphia football game. Alex Smith is like the story of the year. I mean, what a comeback story. They thought this guy was going to die. And then they thought they were going to have to amputate his leg. And then they didn't know if he was going to walk. 2 years later, he's playing NFL football again and maybe about to lead his team to the playoffs, even though no 9-7 team should be a playoff team. Just throwing that out there. Anyway, guys, we got a lot of things to get caught up in here, so let's not waste any time and let's jump right into it, shall we? And we're going to start getting caught up here with a question from Frankie Gouge, who writes, people forget about New Year's Eve films. I think my favorite is Strange Days. However, a lot of great films have New Year's Eve scenes. Godfather 2 is like one of the best. Sleepless in Seattle, When Harry Met Sally, etc. Yep. Forrest Gump has a good one. You know what one has a really good one that just because it's powerful in relation to the rest of the story, is the Daniel Day-Lewis Phantom Thread. That one has a really good one. I think I said Forrest Gump. Rosemary's Baby has a pretty good one too, like in relation to its story. I'm sure there's probably about 20 or 30 other good ones I could think of if I sat down and just thought it out for a few minutes, but those are some of the good ones that come to mind. But yeah, that Godfather 2 one, probably the best one ever. All right, Miguel Zayn writes, hey, John. Finally watched Soul, and I effing loved it. Throughout the movie, I was thinking to myself that the score sounds similar to Social Network. Then, after I looked up who did it, and it was the composer of Social Network. This is one of Pixar's deepest movies. Listen, I really enjoyed Soul. I love it. I love it. To me, it's not, one of the top 3 or 4 best Pixar films, but it is a solid, worthy entry in the Pixar pantheon, if you will. But I'll tell you what, though, the thing to me, and some of you may have heard me say this already about Soul, the thing about it is the message of the movie. And you think you know what the message is. Like when you're watching the beginning of the movie, and if you watch the trailers, you're thinking the message is the same message of a million other films. Chase your dreams. Go after your dreams. Find your big purpose and be your big purpose. And that is the key to happiness. And about halfway through this movie, you realize, oh my God, that is not the message of this movie. And it's actually something completely opposite. And I found that so deep and profound that, again, I don't put it up there with like, say, Up or Toy Story 3 or things like that. But it's a great film and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm glad you did too, Miguel. All right, next up, we go to another one from Frankie Gouge, who writes, the discussion about the prologue and intro of Wonder Woman 84 makes me think that maybe just the tip of the iceberg with Studio Jenkins' interactions on the film, leading to the drop-off in quality. Well, here's what Frankie's talking about. The other day on the John Campea Show, one of our main topics was the fact that Patty Jenkins revealed that the studio wanted her to either take out the opening scene in Wonder Woman 84 on Themyscira, or the scene that came right after that, the scene set in the 80s in the mall, right? Or at least take out one of them. To me, that's a little ridiculous because that opening scene on Themyscira was the best scene in the movie. I mean, I thought that scene was great. Now, you know by now that I was pretty disappointed with Wonder Woman 84, but man, after that opening scene, I was like, this movie's going to be great. So that was kind of crazy. So Frankie's saying that he thinks that may just be the tip of the iceberg and that might have led to the quality of the film and yada, yada, yada. Here's the thing that most film fans don't understand. Those types of conversations happen with every single movie. Those kinds of conversations happen with every single movie. I mean, maybe it's hyperbole to say every single movie, but just about every movie that comes out has, at some point, notes. They call it notes. Had notes from the studio being given to the filmmakers. That's a daily occurrence. All right. So that happens all the time. Patty Jenkins just happened to come out and say one of the notes that she got was the studio felt the movie was running a little bit too long, and the studio was right. One of the problems of Wonder Woman 84 is that it runs too long. 2.5 hours for some movies is the perfect length, but that was not the right length for Wonder Woman 84 at all. So the studio was actually right. The movie was running too long. And the studio was also right. They probably should have pulled that mall scene and reworked something else. But they were absolutely wrong about pulling the Themyscira scene. That scene, again, best scene of the movie. But what I would say to that, Frankie, is we got to keep in mind those types of interactions, every one of your favorite movies you can ever think of, those types of interactions happened. It's just a truism about the business. The notes always come. Because at the end of the day, the movie isn't the directors. The movie is the studios. It belongs to them. And so they obviously always feel they have the right to give some notes and give some direction about what they want in their property. It belongs to them. You know, I often compare it to a house decorator. I mean, you can hire a house decorator and you trust the decorator to go in and do stuff. But if the house decorator wants to paint your living room purple and you hate purple, guess what? At the end of the day, it's your house. You're the one who has to ultimately approve what gets done. It's not that you're trying to step on the decorator's toes, but it's your house. So if you don't want purple in the living room, you shouldn't have to have purple in the living room. All I'm saying, Frankie, is that those types of conversations, like we just heard that Patty Jenkins had to have with Warner Brothers, that is not unique. That's not different. Those conversations happen in MCU movies all the time. They happen in DCEU movies. They happen in James Bond movies. They happen in Harry Potter movies. They happen all over the place. So nothing new to see here. Honestly, really, there's really nothing to see here on that. All right, next up, we've got the Wakandan Forever writes, my plans for the new year. You know the usual, get in shape, learn the new language, protect Wakanda. You know I had to ask, John, what are your New Year's resolutions? Feliz Ano Novel, Wakanda, para siempre. I'm learning. Happy New Year, Wakanda forever. Somebody asked me that the other day. What are my New Year's resolutions this year? And the funny thing is, I'm one of these guys that every year I make New Year's resolutions are something I look forward to doing every year. And so I am. Not everybody's a New Year's resolution person. I am. I like making New Year's resolutions. To be completely honest, though, I didn't make any this year because between just the hecticness of doing this show and the craziness of just the world we live in right now, and on top of all that, Ann and I bought a house, and we're having renovations done, all that kind of stuff. All of these things just kind of distracted me. And it wasn't until like 24 hours before New Year's I realized I hadn't made any New Year's resolutions this year. And so I hadn't made any. I didn't make any this year. Although I am a New Year's resolution guy, next year I will make extra sure that I make New Year's resolutions. Anyway, thanks for that, Wakanda Forever. Next up, Angry Ogre writes, hey, John, one of two. Wonder Woman 84 is bringing up so much confusion. I understand that many think that Max Lord's renouncing his wish could turn back all wishes from after he became the Stone. Even if that is how it worked, the way it was filmed contradicts that. It does. So, at the least, the direction of that sequence doesn't work. The way it was filmed leans towards the fact. Let me try this again. The way it was filmed leans towards the fact that everyone did have to renounce their wish. Also, Diana's does he would have been redundant. I'm not quite sure what that last part means, Angry Joe. Yeah, I mean, listen, we addressed this pretty fully in a couple of videos already, but just to give you the quick Coles notes, there is a belief out there that the one ending of Wonder Woman 84 is explained in that once Max renounced his wish, it automatically renounced all the wishes that were made on him as the Dreamstone. The problem with that is that the film very clearly shows that that's not what happened. Because the movie shows, in chronological order, Max renounces his wish and leaves, and nothing happens. Then the nukes are still in the air. Everything is still going badly. Then we go to the president. And the president is the one who wished for all the extra nukes and everything. The president then says, I renounce my wish. And it is then and only then, once the president renounced his wish, that the nukes disappeared. Then we go to the oil lord, right? And we see him in deep regret and tears in his eyes and crying. And then he says, I renounce my wish. It is then and only then did the magic wall around his country then disappear. Not when Max renounced his wish, but when he renounced his wish. The nukes didn't disappear when Max renounced his wish. The nukes disappeared when the president renounced his wish. And then the movie makes a point of going around and showing different people renouncing their wishes. So the movie clearly shows that Max undoing his wish did not magically and automatically revoke everybody else's wishes that were made on him. The movie simply doesn't say it happened that way, leaving us in a state of it making no sense. So yeah, I see what you're saying there, Angry Ogre. All right, next up. Angry Ogre also writes, John, I am also one that thought that Minerva had multiple wishes, but on second watch, I noticed that during Lord's broadcast, he says, give her your rage and your prowess. When did we establish that the stone can delegate where things it takes goes? It never does. It's yet again, look, this, you guys know, if you've followed me and watched me for any period of time, I was really looking forward to Wonder Woman 84. Because I love Patty Jenkins. I really enjoyed the first Wonder Woman movie. I was stoked for this one. Even though the trailers weren't all that good, I was stoked for this movie. But the more, I watched the film twice. And the second time through, it made even more chaotic, less sense. And the more I think about it, the less and less sense the movie makes. They just... I don't know what to say other than... I'm not saying that they didn't try. Clearly they tried. They're making a big feature film. They're going to try. But it feels like they didn't put in the work narratively to work out properly, how does this work? And then once we decide how all these mechanisms work, how do we communicate those mechanisms to the audience? And I felt like they did neither of them. There are contradictory rules set up throughout the movie about what the Dreamstone does and what it does not do. How are the effects of the Dreamstone undone and how are they not undone? To then the point of how do we communicate whatever those things are we have to the audience? And it feels like they didn't accomplish any of that. It feels like they had this neat idea. Dreamstone, make wishes, great, go. But they never stopped to think out what are the questions the audience will ask that could raise some real logic problems with our movie. And it feels like they didn't ask those questions. I'm sure they did. It just feels like they didn't, So, hey, chalk this one up to a bad day at the office. Hope and trust that they learn from their mistakes here and just believe, at least me, I just believe that the third Wonder Woman movie will be the best one yet because I believe they're going to learn their mistakes from this one. All right, next up. The Sock writes, Sony needs to get a move on about figuring out what they're going to do in terms of streaming. I don't know if they really have the library to really even justify starting their own from scratch. Even if they did, it's too late in the game. If they could acquire Starz and Showtime and merge them with Crunchyroll into one, then they'd have a much better chance. But even then, it's still really risky. I think they'd better being an exclusive partner for Apple Plus. That's an idea. They need content and they obviously have the money. Well, I mean, here's the interesting thing. We've talked about Sony. There are still a couple of major players out there that don't have like their own streaming outlets, right? Sony being a big one of those. So like when we ask the question after theatrical, if there are theaters still around, but after their theatrical runs, what is Sony going to do with Spider-Man 3? Because it's their movie. They're the distributors of it. It's their film. It doesn't belong to Disney. Doesn't belong to Marvel. They don't get to decide where Spider-Man 3 goes after it's done its theatrical run. Again, if it gets a theatrical run, which I believe it will, but maybe not. What are they going to do with Venom 2? What are they going to do with Morbius? Like once their theatrical runs are done. If there's theatrical runs. Because, unlike Warner Brothers and unlike Paramount, that's got, Paramount Plus, unlike Disney, obviously, they don't have a Sony Plus, right? So they have two options. One, form their own major streaming service. The challenge they face with that is that unlike Warner Brothers and unlike Disney, they would not launch with a pre-existing impressive library of curated library content, right? Disney launches, they had, a century of content that they could put in there. Warner Brothers has an impressive lineup of content they can just start their things with. So that would be a challenge. They would have to see maybe if they could acquire, like you pointed out, acquire a Showtime, acquire Stars, acquire something else along those lines, merge it with whatever IP that Sony is in control of, start with a library there and put your main focus on new original movies and programming. So, and that'll be an uphill battle, but that's one option. The other option is exactly what you just said. Partner with something like Apple. Right? Apple, but here's the problem with partnering with somebody like Apple. Apple is in of itself becoming a studio. They're not just a streamer. They are becoming a production studio in and of themselves. They are becoming the next Paramount, Warner Brothers, Disney. That's what they want to be. And listen, before we guffaw Apple wanting to do that, let's not forget, Apple has enough money to buy and sell Warner Brothers, Disney, Paramount, Universal 10 times over if they want. Like it feels weird to think in those terms when you think about these monstrous financial giants like Comcast, Universal, or like Disney. But the reality is Apple has the money to buy and sell them 5-10 times over. So let's not guffaw at that too awful much. But those are the options, Sock, that they're going to be looking at moving forward. And I'm going to be very interested. I honestly, both ways are risky. Personally, I think the way they should go is exactly, at least in a way, what you were just suggesting. Take what IP they have, they've just recently acquired Crunchyroll, but acquire a more mainstream entertainment kind of brand, like a Stars, like a Showtime, maybe Epic, whatever. Merge that in with your existing content, launch whatever you're going to call it. For now, argument's sake, we'll just call it Sony Plus. Launch that. It's still going to be a very weak library compared to a lot of the other competitors out there, but you've got something there, and then you put most of your emphasis on your original content that you're going to create for your platform. And maybe that original content is Spider-Verse stuff. Maybe that original content is, whatever it's going to be. But they are going to be starting from behind because, HBO Max, Disney Plus, all these players are so far ahead of them now. It's going to be a long-term play to get caught up. Either way, they've got some challenges there. All right, Meta writes, "Hello, John. I think you're still confused about the wishing situation." Oh, I don't think I'm confused at all. Anyway, the people only get one wish, and Barbara's was to be strong like Wonder Woman. As a result, it took away her humanity. Since Wonder Woman isn't human, she's Amazonian. It's a give and take situation with this god. She got her cheetah from Max. He granted the wish of someone and in turn gave Barbara more. She never made another wish on that plane. So when Max renounced his wish, it took back all the takes of the people. Example. No, it didn't. We've already walked through that. The movie makes it very clear. Max renouncing his wish took back nobody's wishes. Took back nobody's wishes and took back nobody's takes. Right? And again, it leaves us with the problem. See, everybody keeps forgetting the second step of that. That is the glaring weakness here. Follow that through. Barbara's original wish is still very much a problem because a lot of people are saying, well, Barbara just never renounced her first wish. That's a contradiction to the movie because the movie clearly states halfway through, everyone must renounce their wish. Everyone who makes a wish must renounce their wish. You cannot lose sight of that. Now, there was another option given in that scene with Chris Pine. When they're reading out, it's like the other option is that the stone is destroyed. However, Max renouncing the renouncing his wish did not destroy the stone, right? It couldn't have, because all the results of the wishes were still in play. The president's wish was still in play. The oil lord's wishes were still in play. They still had to manually themselves renounce their wishes. Thus, the second rule that Chris Pine points out in the movie, that everyone must renounce their wish. If everyone doesn't renounce their wish, then calamity will still come. They won't be able to avoid the calamity. So to say Barbara didn't renounce her wish, okay, you can say that, but then that's a direct contradiction to everything else that they played out in the film. So it's a problem if you look at it one way, and it's a problem if you look at it another way. That's why the problem is the script. The script made it so there is no actual non-contradictory solution. Because of the script, there's no non-contradictory solution. Every solution everybody tries to come up with and float is in contradiction to something else that is explicitly stated in the movie. And I don't have the answer either. That's why I'm saying the problem's the script. The problem is the script. Anyway, so there's that. All right. Next up, SC writes, greetings, John. I'm interested as to, let me try this again. I'm interested as to why you think Captain America, The First Avenger is an underrated movie. Great critic score 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was a commercially successful comic book movies weren't making $1 billion back then. It had the #1 spot in the box office. And after some week, almost every major movie has the #1 spot at the box office in its opening weekend. So that's not saying anything. After some weak movies in the MCU, Iron Man 2, Thor, and the Incredible Hulk, Thor was not a weak. Thor is like the second most under. Kenneth Branagh's Thor is amazing. Maybe you mean Thor 2. Anyway, I think Captain America, the First Avenger, really turned things around. Also, earned more in midnight showings than other 2011 superhero movies, Thor, Green Lantern, X-Men First Class, and most people love it. No, actually, most people don't love it. That's the thing. Most people don't love it. I'm not saying most people dislike it, but I literally every week have thousands upon thousands of messages that get sent in to me, and I have for years, and I can tell you most definitively, most people don't love it. What I have found is that most people like it. Most people like it. But generally speaking, whenever you go to most rankings of MCU movies, Captain America, The First Avenger, like more times than not, ends up in the bottom third of all those lists. Right? Again, there's a distinction between me saying most people don't like it. That's not true. What I found is that most people like it, but don't think it's one of the stronger MCU movies. And by the way, opening weekend box office numbers is not an indication about whether people liked a movie or not, right? Opening weekend box office numbers speaks to anticipation and marketing and all these types of things. It doesn't really speak to whether or not people liked it. I mean, look at the opening weekend box office numbers of a lot of the Transformers movies. There you go. They don't speak to what people long-term quality is. And what I can tell you is, as somebody who gets to be exposed to a lot of opinions from a lot of film fans, I can tell you that I have personally found that no, I do not believe Captain America, The First Avenger gets its credit, gets its due. It's looked at as not a bad film, but a little bit above that by most people. And I found, honestly, no, most people do not love it. Because like I said, you go over most MCU ranking films, you'll normally find that First Avengers somewhere down in the lower third. You're not going to find a lot of people who say it's a terrible movie, but that's why I said I believe Captain America is underrated and underappreciated. I think it is better than what it generally gets credit for. Not saying that people hate it, but I believe it's better than the credit it gets. And maybe it's because it was, one of the original MCU films. Maybe it's seen as, it was so long ago, but it wasn't the first one like Iron Man, so we still remember that one. But yeah, I think Captain America, The First Avenger is the third most underrated comic book film of all time. I think Kenneth Branagh's Thor is the second most underrated comic book film of all time. And I think by a mile, I think Zack Snyder's Man of Steel is by far the most underrated comic book film of all time. But anyway, that's my take on that. Thanks for that, SC. All right, next up. Meta. Oh, writes 3 of his last one. Barbara still doesn't have her powers. Barbara does still have her powers. She just doesn't look like Cheetah anymore. Again, that would be a contradiction to the movie if she does. This will also explain how she will be in Wonder Woman 3 most likely, still having Diana's power. Hope this makes sense. It's hard to explain through text. Love the show. No, and again, I appreciate the meta, but again, if Barbara still has her powers, and you know, the movie did not give us a clear answer whether she did or did not renounce her powers and renounce her wish, right? The movie didn't give us a clear indication of whether she did or did not. I believe the implied message of the movie is that she did. If she did not, again, that contradicts the rules of the movie. If she could not undo her wish, then the world would still come to calamity because that's the rule they said earlier in the film. If anybody who makes a wish has to unmake the wish. And if she didn't, that undoes it. It also creates an additional problem. If she didn't undo her wish, then what's stopping 100,000, 500,000, 5 million other people refusing to undo their wish too? You know, little Bobby, who wanted a giant green ogre as his best friend bodyguard, why is little Bobby going to undo his wish? He won't undo his wish. You know, a mother of a dying child who wished for her son's illness to go away, she's not going to undo her wish. If you're saying that Barbara could just not undo her wish and not have any consequences as to the calamity that they said early in the movie it would bring, then why should we believe for a second that hundreds of thousands of other people would not have failed to renounce their wishes? Again, the problem lies within the script. It gives us no actual way out. There is no way to answer these problems without creating contradictions within the movie itself, and that is a weakness in the script. That's a weakness in the script right there. Anyway, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that, Meta. Appreciate it, man. All right, James Argenta writes, yes/no. Do you think any of these rebels will appear in Cassian Andor? Saw Gerrera, Hera, Kanan, Ahsoka, Bail Organa, Leia, Bray Organa, or Enfys Nest, whose actress Erin Kellyman is in Falcon and Winter Soldier and rumored to appear in the Willow series. If you're asking me to answer yes or no as to whether I think any of those will appear, yes. I think Bail Organa is a foregone conclusion. I think Bail Organa is a foregone conclusion. I have by the way, I say that as if I have seen some official report that says he's going to be back. I have not. But to me, I can't possibly imagine that a show, an intrigue thriller spy show, action show revolving around the early days of the rebellion, when Bail Organa was such an important character, to have him not be a part of it, I cannot imagine that being the case. Cannot imagine that being the case. So if all you're asking is yes or no to any of them, my answer will be yes. And I think there's probably a decent shot for a couple of those others as well. But just on the basis of Bail Organa alone, I have to say yes. I believe we will see at least one of them in there. Saw Gerrera is also a good possibility for that. I doubt we're going to see Kanan or Ahsoka or things like that. But yeah, I think a couple of them are definitely have high probabilities. All right. The Black Knight writes, just watch Wonder Woman 84 after being educated by you on why not to fan cast. Even though I barked on about wanting Pine to be Green Lantern, the dynamic between him and Diana as Steve Trevor fits really well. Thought it was okay, watch 6 out of 10. And listen, I have to concur with you. It is an extension of what really was amongst the best things in the first film as well. The dynamic between Steve and Diana. that is really carried by Chris Pine. Chris Pine does all the real acting heavy lifting there, but to Gal Gadot's credit, she plays off him well. And it was even better, I thought, in Wonder Woman 84. Look, overall, yes, the movie is a disappointment to me. I think this one was didn't work, but that doesn't mean there weren't elements about it that didn't work really well. I thought, for example, the Themyscira scene, I thought that worked really well. I thought the battle with Cheetah, although it was too short, was effective. But at the end of the day, I always loved every scene that had Steve and Diana together in a scene. I really enjoyed it. Despite the fact that it was utterly ridiculous how they got the plane in the first place, and that Steve Trevor from 1917 can just get into a quote unquote modern aircraft with technology he's never even dreamed about and can just fly the plane. Despite all that, you know, that scene in the plane with the two of them talking and then, you know, beholding the beauty of the fireworks under the clouds, that scene worked really well for me. It was almost ruined by the fact of how they got to the scene. But overall, the scene worked really well for me, as did all the scenes between Steve and Diana. So yeah, I agree. To me, those were some of the strong points of the movie. All right, Snake writes, considering that all 4 of 2020 comic book movies sucked, is this the worst year for comic book movies in a while? Oh yeah, I'd say absolutely yes. Also, do you think that because of that, there is a legit risk of the audience having comic book fatigue going into 2021? No, if anything. So, you know, we talked the other day about, you know, looking back at the comic book movies that did manage to come out in 2020. We were looking at Wonder Woman 84. We were looking at New Mutants. We were looking at Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey. And we were looking at Vin Diesel's Bloodshot. Is that what it was? Anyway. Yeah, all movies I was looking forward to, and all of them to me were disappointments. Some worse than others. I do not think any of those, I think if anything, to be honest with you, the lack of the real high profile ones that we won in 2020 and the disappointment from the ones we got, honestly, I feel like that has set the table for everybody being real hungry for what is supposed to come in 2021. I mean, really, I feel if anything, it did the opposite. It made everybody more hungry. I think now people being disappointed with Wonder Woman 84, being disappointed with New Mutants or whatever, I think that has left people really hungry to see Black Widow and really hungry for Matt Reeves' The Batman, even though that's not coming in 2021. But still, I think it's just left the audience a little bit more hungry and more ravenous. So my take on it is actually, it's probably the opposite, but we'll find out. We'll find out for sure. Thanks for writing that in, Black Knight. All right. Sorry, that was Snake. Thanks for writing that in, Snake. Next up, we've got Nate Dogg writes, Happy New Year, John. Thank you so much, my friend. I just want to say how much I appreciate all the hard work and dedication you put into your program. Thank you, man. It's one of the best shows on YouTube, and I really appreciate all the care you show your fans. Thank you for everything you do. Well, thanks so much for that, Nate. It's always nice when somebody just wants to write in to say something kind like that. I appreciate that. And we do work really hard, but we consider it a privilege to do what we do. You know, I mean, all I owe you guys, and what I absolutely owe you guys, is my absolute best effort to give you my honest opinion when it's popular and when it's an unpopular one, and to just give you the best effort that I can. And you guys have been so supportive, especially in a year, like we talked about this in the last companion video, but when you look at a year like 2020, if you had told me at the beginning of 2020, hey, a global pandemic's going to hit, and basically you're going to go the year without any real movies coming out in theaters, and the movie industry is, for the most part, going to be shut down. I didn't literally shut down, but I mean, for the most part, shut down. You think your channel's going to survive? Oh, I would have said, no, how could it? I mean, I'm a channel about movies. How could my channel possibly survive a year like that? And yet, here we are. And I think that is a testimony to two things. I think it's a testimony to our community and just how supportive our community is. But I also think it's a testimony to how dedicated film fans are to loving film so much that we're even talking about films every day on a 2-hour movie show when there's no new movies, and we were still doing it. And so believe me, I am cognizant, very, very cognizant of how I don't like to use the word blessed a lot, but how blessed I am that I get to be a part of a community like this, and that we are still here. And, for all of our sakes, we see the light at the end of the tunnel finally coming, and it's a real privilege. So thank you for the kind words, Nate. I really appreciate that, man. All right. Dark Lock writes, what happened to the stone in Wonder Woman 84? Congrats on the new house. I recommend adding a bidet to the list of renovations. Happy New Year to you and Ann. Oh, dude, don't even get me started about the bidet. That's all Ann talked about as soon as we were getting our own house. Bidet, bidet, bidet. And I at first said, no, come on, baby. I don't want one of those things in there. It's going to look ridiculous. I saw how happy it would make her, and we thought, okay, fine. Because we got to agree, right? She and I got to agree on the things we're going to do in the house. So I'm like, fine. We have consensus. And she's so happy she's getting this bidet. I mean, that's all she talks about now, the bidet. Can't wait to install the bidet. Bidet all day. That's what I got to deal with. The question about what happened to the stone is a good question. Did it suddenly rematerialize into existence somewhere since Max himself was no longer the stone? Maybe. I mean, Scarf Guy suddenly got his body back. A magic wall magically disappeared. So if Max himself was no longer the stone, would the stone have rematerialized? That's my only guess. That's my assumption. Because again, if the stone had been destroyed, right? If the stone had been destroyed, then according to the rules set up in the movie, that should have undone everybody's wishes. Like the moment Maxwell Lord renounced his wish and he was no longer the stone himself, if the stone was then, by extension, destroyed, that should be it. Nothing else is needed. Nothing else needs to be done. All the wishes that were made on the stone are now gone. Because that's what they set up. They said you either got to have every single person renounce their wish, or you got to destroy the stone. So if the stone was destroyed, then the president wouldn't have had to have undone his wish to make the nukes disappear. If the stone had been destroyed, then the oil baron wouldn't have had to have undid his wish to make the wall disappear. So again, it's a contradictory thing set up in the movie that they didn't work out very well. So I can only assume, I don't know this for a fact, so we may find out differently later on. Right now, my guess would be that they didn't show it in the movie, but the stone must have rematerialized and is still out there somewhere. Because if it wasn't, all the wishes should have automatically have been undone. But they didn't. So I got to guess that the stone's still out there. Again, the movie was very vague on that, though. Darklock, it was very vague. All right, next up. Digital JP writes, as always, great show. Thank you so much, Digital. I appreciate that, man. I feel you and Rob were right about Wonder Woman 84. I would have been best keeping the beginning, ditch the mall scene. I agree. Like, if you had to lose one, and I really would have liked to have lost the mall scene, definitely keep the Themyscira scene. Anyway, I would add shorten Max Lord scene, have a god emerge on that scene to include Wiggs Cheetah, come back in case of Wonder Woman 3. You know, I can't remember if it was Rob or somebody else that brought that whole point up. Why not? I know what the answer is, but the question we would ask is, why didn't they have that god that made that stone pop up? Have him interact with Cheetah and say, I've beheld your worthiness to challenge that pestilent Diana. I bequeath upon you the power of the cheetah. Why he speaks like that, I have no idea. But in my mind, that's the way that god speaks. So anyway, now, the obvious answer as to why they didn't have that god appear and do that is because, according to the first movie, Ares, I think, killed all the gods. I think all the gods are dead. I think. Isn't that what they said in the first movie? I don't know. I think that's what they said in the first movie. But that would have been, listen, that would have solved so many problems. That would have solved so many problems. If they had just said that, okay, I take that back. It wouldn't have solved all the problems. I take that back. But I think that would have been a step in the right direction, Digital. I think you're totally on the right track there. I think that would have been a step in the right direction. All right, next question up. A fan of Peanuts writes, After just watched The Midnight Sky and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, that is George Clooney's movie, and the final performance of Chadwick Boseman in that order. Now, the former was a little choppy paced and stale, but ultimately decent, 6.9 out of 10. However, Black Bottom is Oscar-worthy from both. Yes, both Viola. Well, Viola's always Oscar-worthy. And Chadwick, 8.5 out of 10. They deserve noms, in my opinion. It's hard to say whether they deserve noms when I mean, you can only say they deserve a nomination if you've seen every other eligible film. Because if there are 5 other people who deserve the nomination more, then they don't deserve nominations. But Viola always does, and there are already early whispers about Chadwick Boseman and his performance for this. Going to The Midnight Sky, another holiday season movie that I watched that I was really disappointed in. I didn't hate it. There were some great ideas there. I thought the trailers for Midnight Sky had me so intrigued because I love planetary disaster movies and I love like space survival movies. This movie looks like both, and it is both. But yeah, I mean, the twist of the movie, the more I thought about it, it contradicted a lot of things in the movie, so that made no sense. And there were some huge issues of convenience that were in a very unsatisfying ending because of the calamity, and all that kind of stuff. It was a disappointment to me, unfortunately. I'm glad you liked it enough to give it like a 7 out of 10. That's great. I wish I did too, because I'm a big George Clooney fan. I thought the movie looked terrific. I was excited to see it, but ultimately, to me, it ended up being pretty disappointing, unfortunately. I'm glad you liked it more than I did, though, Fan of Peanuts. All right, Fan of Peanuts also writes, my top 10 films from 2007. A very hard year to rank. Number 10, Gone Baby Gone. God, I love that movie. Number 9, In the Valley of Allah. Number 8, Ratatouille. Number 7, Zodiac. Number 6, The Bourne Ultimatum. Number 5, Juno. Number 4, American Gangster. Number 3, really? Juno and Ratatouille came out in the same year? That's crazy to think about. Anyway, number 4, American Gangster. Number 3, Atonement, which was great. Number 2, Country for Old Men. No Country for Old Men. No Country for Old Men. Number 1, There Will Be Blood. The last 3 are masterpieces. Yeah, No Country for Old Men. Atonement is fantastic. I don't know if I'd personally consider Atonement to be a masterpiece, but it is utterly fantastic. That's Keira Knightley's movie. Let me just make sure. Atonement. I believe that's Keira Knightley's. Unless I'm thinking of the wrong movie. Yes, yeah, it is the right one. Directed by Joe Wright, speaking of Captain America. Directed by Joan White. It also has Saoirse Ronan in it, which is awesome. Hold on a second here. Let me just double check here. Anyway, yes, great movie. Ratatouille is actually one of my favorite Pixar films, too. Ratatouille is like one of my favorite Pixar films. Pixar, it's funny because Pixar is weird because they have so many films that are so unbelievably good that it's difficult to, and by the way, I was thinking of Joe Johnson, not Joe Wright. I don't know what I was thinking there. It is difficult to say which one's the best because, I mean, Ratatouille is so incredible. The Incredibles is so incredible. Up is so incredible. Toy Story 3, it has to be in the discussion for one of the greatest animated films of all time. It's just so weird. And so Ratatouille belongs up there too. Ratatouille is one that always moves my heart, but you're right. Same year, No Country for Old Men, There Will Be Blood. There Will Be Blood, by the way, in my opinion, the movie with the single greatest male lead acting performance in the history of Hollywood. Daniel Day-Lewis' performance in There Will Be Blood, I contend, is the single greatest performance by a lead male actor in any film ever. Not that There Will Be Blood is the greatest film ever, but I'm in there too. Anyway, nice list, Fan of Peanuts. I like that one. All right, next up. Eric Lynch writes, hey, John, this is about the question. Try this again. This is about the question, is Wonder Woman bulletproof? The answer is no. She is invulnerable to any form of attack except for piercing weapons, which also mean bullets. Otherwise, she's pretty much invincible because she can't be armed. Because she can't be armed like Superman. But when do they say that in the movie? Like, here's the thing. The questions come up a lot lately about, is Wonder Woman bulletproof in the movie? We're not talking about the comics, talking about in the movies. Because in many ways, she seems invulnerable. But whenever somebody's shooting bullets at her, she can't just let the bullets bounce off her. She actually has to physically block them, either with a shield or with her wrist bracelets, right? She's got to block the shots. And the one time she didn't block the shot, she bled. Now, some people say that she only bled because she was losing her powers. I think, not know, think. I think her bleeding and losing her powers didn't result in it breaking her skin. I think her losing her powers or starting to lose her powers is what made her unable to block it, like react to it in time to block the bullet before it pierced her skin. So that's the thing. I can't think of any time in the movies, Eric, where the movies specifically lay out that she is very, very tough, but she can still be pierced with bullets and knives and spears and whatnot. I just can't recall a part in the movie where it said that, but I do believe that is the case. But we'll find out in Wonder Woman 3 if they explain that part a little bit more. Thanks for chiming in on that, Eric. Eric Lynch also writes, "Hey, John, one of three. Do you know that Wonder Woman in the DCEU is significantly weaker to her comic book one?" Yes. In the comics, and by the way, when you say to the comic book one, I would have to ask you which comic book one. We have had many iterations of Wonder Woman of varying degrees of power. So when you say the comic book one does this, the question becomes, which comic book one are you talking about? Because sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. Just something to keep in mind. Anyway, the Wonder Woman in the DCU is significantly weaker to her comic one. In the comics, Wonder Woman is strong enough to pull the weight of the Earth by herself, which makes her as strong as the Earth-like Superman. In the DCU, she didn't even know how to fly until recently, which is crazy. Why couldn't she fly before? Well, for the longest time in comics, she never flew. Like, relatively speaking, you know, compared to from when Professor Marsden actually created Wonder Woman to present day, Wonder Woman's being able to fly is a relatively new thing. So keep that in mind. In the DCU, she didn't even know how to fly until recently, which is crazy. Why couldn't she fly before? That's like taking one of her powers away from her. You don't depower Superman. Why do it to her? Again, you're only saying that in light of the most current iteration of Wonder Woman. In the most current iteration, but for the longest time, that just wasn't the case. Like, her power level was not that high. Her ability to fly was not that. Hence why she flew around in an invisible jet and things like that. Anyway, let's get on to the third part of Eric here. Eric also writes, "I hope in Wonder Woman 3 we get to see her level up in power, because in Wonder Woman 84, we really didn't see her prog any stronger with her powers or skills." He probably meant progress with her powers or skills. "We have seen her in 3 DCU movies, and she's still not at the power level she is in the comics." Again, you have to ask the power level she is in which comics. Because there are many Wonder Woman comics in which her power level in the movie actually exceeds what she had in the comics, depending on the era of the comics that you're talking about, right? Also, you also got to keep in mind that they've also, Superman in the DCEU is not leveled as powerful as he has been in several iterations in the comic books either, right? Superman, like, struggling a bit to lift a giant oil rig. Well, I mean, that shit's, it's the Superman of the Superman in the comics can lift Atlantis out of the water, right? An oil rig, that should be nothing, right? So, but just, it comes down to a thing that I constantly have to remind my fellow fans, which is this. Always remember, the comic books are not the movies. The movies are the movies. The comics are the comics. Just because they do something in the comics does not mean that is something they should even consider doing in the movies. Case in point, the Thanos copter. Should Marvel have had Thanos flying around in a giant purple helicopter that literally said Thanos copter on the side? Because that's in the comics. No. So it's important to understand that the characters we see on the screen are based on characters out of the comic books, but they are not they are not connected by an umbilical cord. It reminds me of when, this is a great example of this. And we've told this story before, but back when Superman Returns was about to come out, and they brought Superman Returns to Comic-Con, and somebody in the audience noticed, hey, we noticed that you changed the Superman costume. What made you decide to change the Superman costume? Because there were some minor differences between the costume that we saw in the movie versus what we saw in the comic books. To which the director said something rather brilliant. The director said, when you ask me, why did we change the Superman costume? I have to ask you back, change it from what? There have been 22 different versions of the Superman costume, some big changes, iterations, some minor iterations, but there have literally been, up until that point, there's been even more now. But at that point, he said, there have been 22 different iterations of the Superman comic. So when you ask me, why did I change it? I want to ask you, change it from what? Because it's been changed so many times. So again, the Wonder Woman in the movie is not the Wonder Woman from the comic. And then if you do want her to be the Wonder Woman from the comic, then we have to ask, from which comic? Wonder Woman has gone through a lot of different variations and a lot of different iterations, different power sets, different histories, different skill levels, different abilities, all different personalities even. I mean, the Wonder Woman in the comics in the 70s is a radically different personality than the Wonder Woman that we understand today, right? So if you say we should have the Wonder Woman from the comic, then the next question would be, from which comic? From the 1950s? From the 70s? From the Injustice Gods Among Us version? From the one that we see in the DC animated stuff? From the modern comic run? I mean, so yeah, just something for us to keep in mind. Eric. Anyway, thanks for writing that in, man. I appreciate it. It's good to have a solid Wonder Woman comic fan here. All right. Qui-Gon Gin and Tonic writes, what are your thoughts on Quentin Tarantino? I think he's great. What's your favorite film/scene of his? Personally, he's my favorite director. He can make simple lines of dialogue so engaging. Example, Hateful Eight. Not his best film. No, not his best film. 90% shot in one cabin. No, I think Quentin Tarantino is a terrific filmmaker. My favorite film of his, it's funny because my favorite film of his used to be my least favorite film of his, and that is Inglourious Basterds. That might be challenged by Django. Django Unchained might be, for now, I'll still say Inglourious Basterds. And I hated that movie the first time I saw it. Then the second time I saw it, I'm like, why? What? Why did I not like this the first time I saw it? Was I having a bad day? Was I in a bad mood when I just couldn't understand, because I absolutely became my favorite Quentin Tarantino film. Anyway. But yeah, he's got a couple that I'm not thrilled with. I'm not thrilled with, The Hateful Eight. I'm certainly not thrilled with, what's it called? The one, his half of, Grindhouse. Was it Death Car or something like that? I'm not a big fan of that movie, but my one, it's not even a criticism about Quentin Tarantino. It's a wish. My one wish is I would love to see Quentin Tarantino do a movie that is not so blatantly a Quentin Tarantino movie. You know what I mean? Because, for example, you look at somebody like Spielberg, right? Spielberg can do any kind of movie. And he has done every kind of movie. He's even doing a Broadway musical now in West Side Story. He's done comedy, comic book movies, sci-fi adventure, historical epics, blah, 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 blah. He's done radically different. He even just recently I loved Ready Player One. Quentin Tarantino, by the vast majority of his films are great, you can also, if you never knew a movie you were watching was a Quentin Tarantino movie, 5 minutes into it, you would be able to guess it's a Quentin Tarantino movie, right? Like most of Quentin Tarantino's movies have a very distinct Quentin Tarantinoism to it. And what I would love to see Quentin Tarantino do, being as skilled as he is before he retires, do something completely different. That's part of the reason why I think a lot of people, including me, got very excited when we heard there was a possibility Quentin Tarantino might possibly do a Star Trek movie. It's looking less and less likely that's actually going to happen, but that's part of the reason why I was so excited by that notion, just to see Quentin Tarantino do something so outside of his regular comfort zone, so outside of the regular, the very defined sandbox that he usually plays in. It would be great. But if he doesn't, it's still one of the greatest careers of all time. I mean, he just makes some dynamite, thought-provoking, engaging, thrilling kind of movies, and I really like his stuff. Anyway, thanks for that, Qui-Gon. Next up, Sam Phillip writes, "Hey, John, Happy New Year." Thank you so much, Sam. I just thought of something. Since Walter Hamada just announced that starting next year, there will be 4 theatrical DC movies every year for the next couple of years, do you think maybe in 2023 or 2024, it could be a Superman movie? Oh, absolutely. Listen, you already know that I believe that another Superman movie is a foregone conclusion. We told you guys a while ago that J.J. Abrams has been given the keys to Superman. He's been given the keys to Superman. Whether or not that will be Henry Cavill is still, I've heard 2 different things. I heard that he's already decided he wants Cavill to continue to be Superman. I've also heard that he's still keeping his options open. Which is true, I don't know. We'll find out soon enough. But I definitely think we're going to get one of those. And by the way, to really underscore Warner Brothers' ambition here, not only are they looking at doing up to 4 theatrical movies per year, they're also, on top of those 4, want to do 2 straight to HBO Max, smaller budget, more risky, they called it, DCEU movies as well. So we could be literally getting 6 DCEU movies a year. 4 theatrically, 2 for HBO Max, if there's theaters still. And on top of that, they're also looking at spinning off some things and doing HBO Max series. So we could be in store for a lot of DC content, man. Like a lot of DC content. Let's see how this all kind of comes together. But I definitely think Superman is in the cards. All right. Whether that'll be Man of Steel 2 or not, I'm not really sure. Eric Lynch writes, "Sorry, John, if you had trouble reading my last question. Prog actually means get any stronger. I thought you meant progress. That's what I meant to write. No problem. Everything else you wrote made it pretty clear what you're saying. But I thank you so much for your consideration and courtesy to follow up just to make sure I knew what you're saying. Thank you for that, Eric. You are a good person. Thank you for that, dude. All right, next up. Flurkin Danvers writes, "Tom Hanks specifically named the MCU when referring to franchises that will keep theaters open. What does that say about Feige and his team who have become a beacon of hope? Even as a Marvel fan, it's still surreal how far Marvel has come. Happy New Year." Well, yeah, I don't think Hanks was saying it's only MCU films. I think he was just pointing out movies like this. And you're right. I mean, look, we take it for granted now, but there was a time not long ago when comic book movies were still kind of seen as slumming it a bit, right? Yeah, they had an audience. If you wanted to, debase yourself and do something as low as a comic book movie. And there were some good ones. I mean, the Michael Keaton Batman, but that was ages ago. Christopher Reeve's Superman, but that was ages ago, right? It was not that long ago. People forget, and I've told this story before too, but, in my early days at AMC, and we were getting our shows going and everything, I kind of, in an unofficial way, considered it to be a part of my job to try to convince a lot of movie fans to give comic book movies a shot. That I thought they were getting better. That there's so much great, real mythology, like human mythologies that have been used, and the deep cores of what a lot of dramatic stuff can be done. These things can all be found in really great comic book stories. So I saw it as a part of my job when I started AMC to try to get people to give comic book movies a shot. What's funny is, by the time I left AMC, I saw it as a part of my job to try to get people to try something other than comic book movies, because it kind of, with the explosion of the comic book genre, which let's face it, it was the MCU that brought the comic book genre to such prominence. I mean, no disrespect to people who are hardcore DC fans, but let's call it what it is. It was the MCU that elevated the genre to that level. And certainly DC and things played a part in it for sure, but it kind of spawned this new generation of film fans that's all they ever watched. Like the only movies they would watch is like now these huge popcorny, and I mean that in a good way, popcorny blockbuster movies, right? Comic book movies. And so I went in just a span of a very few short years going from, I got to try to convince people to give comic book movies a shot to, I got to try to convince people to try something other than comic book movies. Like that's how drastically things changed. And again, it's not like we're talking about the 1980s. We're talking in the 2000s. It really wasn't that long ago when things were very, very different. It is crazy, not just how much things have changed, but how fast they changed too, man. Absolutely. All right, next up, Qui-Gon Gin and Tonic writes, would a TV season be more consistent in quality if there was only one director? Instead of chop and changing, wouldn't it avoid random dips in episode quality? Do they do this to lessen the workload pressure on one particular director? Well, here's the thing. The big difference between, and no, that wouldn't make much of a difference, and here's why. The big difference between movies and a television series is who is that ultimate person in charge of where this thing's going? In movies, it is the director. I mean, the director has to answer the producers, has to answer the studio. But at the end of the day, the person most responsible for where this whole thing goes is the director. That is not the case in television programming. In television programming, the person responsible for deciding where everything is going is actually the showrunner, who is normally like the head writer or has teams of writers working for them, but is the showrunner. And the director works for them. And the director, now what the director's job in television is not to worry about where are we taking this story. The director in television is, this is what happens in this episode. Now let's bring it to life as good as we can. The director doesn't get to decide in Game of Thrones to say, hey, you know what? Let's have Tyrion die this episode. No, the director can't do that, because the showrunner has already decided where that's all going, right? It is the director's job now to take that material and what is supposed to happen in this story and the dialogue that's been written and really bring it to life. But they can't alter the course of the show, right? So with that in mind, no, not really. I don't think... that's why, listen, most shows have a different director for every episode. And yet it will still feel very consistent for the most part because it's the same showrunner who's at the helm of making sure the story just flows and is one consistent story throughout. There are some examples of a director directing an entire series, a season of a show. But that's rare. That's not normal. That's rare. As a matter of fact, the new Obi-Wan series coming up, Good Canadian Girl, I think it's Deborah Chow. Is that who's doing it? Let me just bring it up here. Obi-Wan. I think it's Deborah Chow who's going to be directing that. And I cannot find... I think I'm going to go with Deborah Chow. I think it is Deborah Chow. Actually, no, let me look this up. Obi-Wan, Deborah... It is Deborah Chow. Yeah, Good Canadian Girl, Deborah Chow, who directed a couple of the best episodes of Mandalorian Season 1. She's directing the entire season of Obi-Wan. So that's a little bit of a different dynamic. But you still have one person in charge in the TV show overseeing the whole story flow. So while you may feel a little bit difference of tone from here and there because the different directors, bring their fingerprint to each episode and each director will bring that episode to life in a little bit of a different way, the story should theoretically stay completely consistent because it's still the one showrunner or two showrunners, whatever, that are overseeing the development of it. And that's not to devalue the role of the director in television. It's still very important. Like, that's great. You've got a great script here for a great episode of TV, but until it's manifested and truly brought to life, and that's the job of the director. That's why, I said, oh my God, Peyton Reed, you son of a bitch. Peyton Reed is the guy who directed the final episode of Mandalorian Season 2, the one where Luke Skywalker shows up, right? And it's a brilliantly directed episode. The creative shots about how he wanted to convey things. I mean, the script was there. Peyton Reed didn't make up what was said or anything like that, but he had to take that script and really bring it to life. and he did a terrific job and really brought it home. So that's kind of the difference between the movie version. And look, before I get 1,000 angry emails, I know I'm oversimplifying that. But that's just kind of the way that is. So no, you don't need one director over the whole thing because you still got a showrunner over the whole thing. All right, next up. J Meister 25 writes, Thanos, Stark, Tony. Thanos, Stark, Tony. You know me, Thanos. I do. You're not the only one cursed with knowledge. Phenomenal moment. Thanos sees his goal of saving the universe as a burden that if only someone else had the will and knowledge to it, he wouldn't have to. I don't know if I saw that in that moment. I don't think that was, I mean, it's an interesting perspective on it, and I've never really considered that. I don't know that I see it that way, though. Like, that moment was really more of an affirmation to me that Thanos is, on top of everything else, a master tactician. He knows all about his enemy before he engages his enemy. He knows Thor. That was already made very clear. He knew exactly who Thor was. He knew exactly who Loki was. I have no doubt he knows who Hulk is and all that kind of stuff. And so when he confronts Stark, he says, Stark, you know me? You're not the only one burdened with knowledge. But you're right. I think in those words saying burdened with knowledge, I think the rest of the movie kind of tells a story that he almost wishes he didn't know that he was right. Of course, he wasn't right, but he wished he didn't knew he was right? But I don't think he was implying that somebody else like a Tony Stark or somebody else could have picked up that dark mantle. I don't know if he was implying that, but it's an interesting way of looking at it, J Meister. I've never really considered that. Thanks for sharing that perspective. All right. My dude writes, John, you are wrong about Wonder Woman 84. Oh, I highly doubt that. The nukes the president wished for didn't just appear out of nowhere. They actually took the lives of innocent... Okay, that's good. They actually took the lives of innocent non-nuclear bombs. Well said. Okay, so that's obviously, playing a bit of a joke on the fact that, Steve Trevor didn't just magically appear, which they totally should have done. If a wall can just magically disappear, why couldn't Steve Trevor just magically manifest and had to instead take over some random dude's body? They took the lives of innocent non-nuclear bombs. Comment of the day. That's the comment of the day right there. Well said, my dude. All right. Dexter writes, hey, John, I've been a fan since the AMC days. Thank you so much, Dexter. So much so, when I do my own movie discussion and reviews, all my friends are telling me I sound like you, especially when the topic of Man of Steel. Happy New Year, John. Stay filthy, my friend. Well, thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. You know what? That's normal because, listen, I know especially in the early days, back when I was doing the Movie Blog Audio Edition, the world's first movie news podcast. And it was. I did the world's first movie news podcast. It was so early, the word podcast hadn't been invented yet. Podcasts had been up and running, but they hadn't the term podcast. By the way, do you guys know where the term podcast came from? It came from the Apple iPod. And since people could listen to the shows on iPods, they became known as podcasts. There was a movement for a couple of years in the tech industry to change the terminology from podcast to webcast because they thought, podcasts are going to become this big, big important thing, and it shouldn't just be titled after this one device. And so there was a movement by a bunch of people in the technology realms to get everybody to change their terminology from podcast to webcast, but it never caught on. And to this day, we know them as podcasts. Anyway, going back to the original days of when I first started my first podcast, the Movie Blog Audio Edition, I would have sounded very much like the guy from the Fan 590, who's Bob McCowan, who's, I believe, now retired. But Bob McCowan was like the main sports figure on the Fan 590, this big Canadian sports radio station. And actually, he's the one that I started doing greetings and salutations. He used to start his daily show with greetings and salutations, and he was my favorite broadcaster, and I mimicked him because he was my favorite. I wanted to be like him. And so I started my movie show because I knew most people didn't listen to Canadian sports radio when I was doing my podcast, and I actually mimicked him, Bob McCown. And I bet, even if I was doing it unintentionally, I bet if you listened to me in those early days, you probably would have gone, wow, John he talks a lot like Bob McCown. And that would have been why, because I mimicked him a lot that way. So if you listen to a lot of me for a number of years, then it's only natural that when you start up your show, you're probably going to have some of my mannerisms as well as you're doing yours. So that's perfect, because I did it and you did it. And maybe someday somebody else will start a show and they'll mimic you because they listened or watched you. So it's all part of the normal prospect, man. All right. Next up, we've got James Argenta, who writes, would you count Robert Downey Jr. voicing the AI as Tony, not a new character, for Riri Williams' Ironheart armor, as MCU bringing Tony back to life? Fun fact, the AI in the comic is named not Tony. No, I wouldn't count that. I mean, that could be a fun thing and they could get Robert Downey Jr. and all that, but I would not count that as Robert Downey Jr. returning. I 100% believe, not know, believe. I believe 100% that Robert Downey Jr. will be back as Tony Stark. Maybe not this year, maybe not in 2 years, maybe not even in 3 years, but I 100% believe he will be back as Tony Stark. But no, if they do bring him back as an AI voice, whether it's Ironheart or something else, no, I wouldn't consider that him being back. I wouldn't consider that. I don't think that would count myself, James. I don't think that would count. All right, next up, NPE94 writes, what franchise/IP movie do you think will be the first to open theatrically in the US? Will No Time to Die keep its April 2nd release date? Or should we look at a later movie like Fast 9 on May 23rd? What would it take for you to feel comfortable in a theater? Well, I mean, that all comes down to about how effectively can they start getting vaccines rolled out, and do we start seeing a drop in spikes? If we start seeing... Now remember, April, still 4 months away. January, February, March, April, like we're still basically 4 months away from hitting, say, mid to late April, right? So that's still a ways off. We have seen that things can change so dramatically and so quickly that anything over 3 months away is still kind of, it's anybody's game, right? Can they get their act together? I mean, there are certain countries that are doing a pretty good job of getting vaccines out, but others are not. Can, the world get its act together, getting the vaccines out, getting them administered? Do we start to see declines in rates and all that kind of stuff? If we see those things happening, like I don't need the virus to be eradicated from the face of the earth in order for me to feel comfortable going back to a movie theater. I just need to see us not being in these absolute dire critical stats that we're having right now. I just need to see us not having, hundreds of thousands of new cases a day. I just need to see that there's not 100,000 hospital beds in the United States right now being used for corona patients. I just need to see these spikes. I need to see things on a downward trajectory. If we start to see a really good, effective plan rolled out for the distribution of vaccines, and we start to see a drop in all those rates, I will then feel comfortable going back to the movie theaters, provided movie theaters still take reasonable common sense precautions. I went to the movie theater to go see Tenet, and I felt very good there. I felt like the safety procedures they had in place were fantastic. I went to the movie theater to see Tenet or New Mutants, and I felt I felt very comfortable there. I felt more comfortable in there than I did in the grocery store, because even though my grocery store does a good job of making me feel comfortable being in there, the movie theater did an even better job. So yeah, we start seeing a more effective rollout of the vaccines. We start to see decline in the rates. I'll feel comfortable going out to the movie theater, provided those movie theaters are still taking some common sense precautions. So April's still a long ways away, man. We'll see. There is, listen, I know there are some people saying, yep, by spring, we're going to be able to put the gears back in motion to get everything back to normal. Not that we'll totally be back to normal by spring, but if that's true or not, we'll have to wait and see. But if they can get to that point, I'll feel comfortable going back. Thanks for that, MPE. And what a great day that'll be. All right. The Cinephile writes, Avengers versus Parasite, Wendy's versus Steak 44. I've never heard of Steak 44. Do you believe in society there is something to be said about fast food and blockbusters being dominant in their respective fields over what's perceived to be the better thing? Wendy's is okay, but it's no Steak 44. I'm not really quite sure. I'm not really clear what it is you're asking, Cinephile. I'll be honest with you. I'm not quite sure what it is you're asking. Let me peek at that again. Do you believe in society there's something to be said about fast food and blockbuster? I don't know what your connection between fast food and blockbusters is. Being dominant in their respective field over what's perceived to be the better thing. Wendy's is okay, but it's no Steak 44. Well, I mean, are you trying to imply that Parasite is better than Avengers? I would argue that. And you know me, I love Parasite. But movies are experiential events. I personally had the better experience with Avengers, even though I still love Parasite. But hey, that's just a matter of opinions. Half a dozen of one, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. That's the saying. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But other than that, no, I think that's just a perception thing. Personally, Cinephile, I think that's just a perception thing. All right, Mac McBride writes, regarding Wonder Woman 84 having franchise purpose, I mostly agree, except for one small thread. Diana had been carrying the death of Steve, and without going into spoilers, there is now clarity going forward for the character. It's lackluster, but it's nice to see it wrap up. The problem is, of course, is that perceived wrap up is in total contradiction with what we saw in Batman versus Superman. The Diana we see in Batman versus Superman, which happens after the events of Wonder Woman 1984, was a Diana still very much, hung up on the one true love of her life, being Steve Trevor. But then again, I mean, look, it feels like whatever angle we try to look at Wonder Woman 84, there is contradiction. Contradiction within itself, contradiction with the other movies, all that kind of stuff. I think it's clear they're throwing their continuity out the window a bit. They're adopting a little bit of the Fox X-Men method of continuity, schmontinuity. Because where Diana ends up with at the end of 1984 is a very different place than the Diana we find in Batman versus Superman. The character who said she's hit herself from the way she retreated from the world of men for 100 years. No, she hasn't. Continuity, schmontinuity. Whichever angle we look at this thing, there's contradiction. Contradiction within its own logic, contradiction with how it relates to the other films in the universe. All right, the Wakandan Forever writes, everyone please watch The Queen's Gambit. Chess players, coaches, and tournament directors, please, please, please watch it. John, I know you have played in the past. For the past 16 years, I've tried to get Mrs. Wakandan interested in chess. She loved it. Well, here's the thing. You don't need to be a chess fan. I've played chess, but I'm not a chess player. So I am not a chess player. You don't have to be a chess player to appreciate Queen's Gambit. A good movie is a good movie. That's all. A good story is a good story. And as you go through the episodes of Queen's Gambit, you're just confronted with a really great story. The fact that chess is at the center of it is almost immaterial. So I would say, yeah, Queen's Gambit is fantastic, but you do not need to be a chess player to watch it. Don't be, because I don't want people out there who think, well, I'm not really into chess, so I don't think I'd like Queen's Gambit. Don't worry about that. It's a terrific, terrific story. Do give it a chance. I think there's a very, very high potential that you will love it. It's going to win a lot of Emmys. Queen's Gambit's going to win a lot of Emmys when the time comes. So yeah, don't just think you have to be a chess player, somebody associated with chess to enjoy it. All right, Yubi wow writes, here are a few things that would make me end myself. Taco Bell closing, music vanishing from existence, Rian Johnson touching Star Wars again, and going another week without Godzilla vs. Kong trailer. When do you think we will get a trailer for it? I'm desperate. I'll be honest with you, Yubi. I don't care. I never care about when trailers come out. When trailers do come out, then I'm very excited and I can't wait to watch it and all that kind of stuff. But trailers are corporate pieces of marketing. That's all they are. So I don't really care when a trailer comes. I just don't care. Will I be excited when I know it's coming? Will I get excited? Sure. But at the end of the day, I really don't care so I don't know when a Godzilla vs. Kong trailer is coming. And I'll be frank, I don't care when it's coming. And I'm looking forward to seeing the movie. I'm looking forward to seeing the movie, but I really don't care. And I really do hope Rian Johnson does do another Star Wars movie. I really do. He is one of the great filmmakers right now. His last film that he just did got a lot of Oscar attention. Knives Out is a phenomenal movie. Looper is a phenomenal movie. Brick is a phenomenal movie. He's a terrific filmmaker. And he made a film, a Star Wars movie that was very, very divisive. And nothing will change that. But when you have a director who's that talented, I'd be down to see him take another shot at it. I'd absolutely be down to take him another shot at it. But that's just me. All right, next up. Nicholas Piera writes, "Hey, John, do you know the Soup's villain named Riot? He has the ability to stick to walls and create an exceptional number of clones, and inflicting damage on one of those clones creates even more clones. I imagine a story which he wants to kill Lex and threatens Soups to kill as many citizens of Metropolis as possible. If he decides to protect Lex, the challenge for Soups would be at the same time moral, physical, and sensory to find the real Riot. I've heard you and Rob say before that Soups had no bad guy to face. I think he had one of the best galleries. For example, is a horrific but touching Bizarro inspired by Frankenstein and Quasimodo really unthinkable for the big screen? No, you could. But here's the thing. I think when you're talking about Bizarro, for example, Bizarro is only really a character you can do once you have a almost James Bond-like established run of Superman on the big screen. Like, I feel like Bizarro is a character you can go to after you've had Superman 5, 6, or 7. Do you know what I mean when I say that? Otherwise, I don't think you have. Now, again, this goes back to what somebody else wrote. We've got to be able to separate ourselves from the comic books, from the movies. And the vast majority of the people who see the movies have never read a comic book. That's hard for a lot of people in comic circles to wrap their heads around. But the reality is the majority of people who go to comic book movies have never read a comic book. Or maybe picked up a couple of comics when they were kids, but really have never, for all intents and purposes, have never read comic books. And so for somebody like a Bizarro, I think you'd have to really establish, and I don't know if it would work, especially the way the DCEU is kind of toned. I don't know if a Bizarro would work or not. I'm not sure. Superman, though, as a character, because he is basically a god amongst mortal men, he presents some real challenges with who presents an effective on-screen movie foil for Superman, right? Out of his rogues gallery. And I would actually contend there's not a lot that have good on-screen potential. There are many, villains in Superman's rogues gallery that can fight Superman, but materializing them in a live action movie on screen is problematic. And I'm sure you can all think of a number of them that just really wouldn't work in a movie. Zod, that's one of the reasons why I think so many iterations of Superman, whether it's Krypton, the TV show, or whether it's the Christopher Reeve one, or whether it's, Man of Steel, why there's such an instant attraction to gravitate to doing Zod. They did him in Christopher Reeve, which is where he was introduced, but you bring him in Christopher Reeve, then the Krypton show, they did Zod, and Man of Steel, they do Zod, because he is a villain that works really well on screen. He's a great, compelling character, right? And I find there's not a lot of Superman villains that can A, represent a true, substantial threat to Superman, and B, be a compelling on-screen movie character. Let alone Superman character, a good standalone multi-dimensional movie character. It's challenging. So whatever characters they decide to use from Superman, they're going to have to do take some creative licenses to really make it work for the big screen at the same time. A Bizarro thing could be really interesting. Again, it's something that would have to come long after they really establish their on-screen Superman. It feels like it would have to be a chapter in the story. But I don't know. Hey, listen, these writers are so good today, they can come up with something that could make it work just like that. You never know. All right, next up. Nicholas Pereira also writes, Parasite, Metallo, Mongol, Livewire, Major Force, Brainiac, Justice League from Another Dimension, etc. I think it's hard for a screenwriter to write a Soup story if he despises him and if he decides to let himself be overwhelmed by his powers. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Anyway, the same goes for his humanity. Audiences will continue to say that it is difficult to identity with Supes until the director focus on Clark and his daily life as a citizen, son, husband, father, and journalist. Clark is the main personality, not Supes. I disagree with that. For example, let's go back to a movie we referred to a little bit ago, Superman Returns. Superman Returns with Brandon Routh, I think is a very good movie. I think Superman Returns is a very good movie. And it's one of the better character studies of the Superman. The problem with Superman Returns is, while I believe it is a very good movie, it is at the same time a very bad comic book movie. You can't have a movie called Superman and have his main fight be against a plane that's falling out of the sky. That's Superman's fight in the movie. A plane falling out of the sky and him at the end having to lift a very heavy rock. But when you get beyond just looking at it as a comic book movie, and you just look at it as a movie, a mythological movie, if you will, that movie as the character study of the Superman, a God-man amongst mortals, and somebody who can do anything, struggling incessantly with just how to be amongst the world that is now his home. Like, to me, that is a fascinating aspect of Superman Returns to me. That real struggle of this guy who can literally fly out into orbit in space and hear everyone in the world, but just not know how to interact with that world. Not know how to be human. How to face the regular relationships and responsibilities and what is his place in this world. I mean, Man of Steel touches on that a bit. And Man of Steel does many things better than Superman Returns does. But one of the things that Superman Returns really did better than almost any Superman story I've ever seen was that whole aspect of the dueling, dichotic nature of the God-man and the human. Johnny's not human. I get that, but his humanity, what he's struggling for, what he's reaching to have. A guy who can have bullets bounce off his eyeball, but not know how to interact with the very people that also inhabit the world he calls home. You see, in that, they didn't need the Clark side. You don't need the Clark side. And quite frankly, I don't think you can do a Superman movie today that focuses on the Clark side that will satisfy audiences. I think the Clark side can play an important role and certainly be a part of that. But the side that audiences are there, the movie's going to be called Superman. So they want to see Superman, right? That's the thing. One of the big criticisms that a lot of people had about Iron Man 3 was the fact that the movie's called Iron Man, not Tony Stark. Now, I personally got a kick out of Iron Man 3, and I kind of like the fact that they focused a lot of it on just Tony Stark aside from the Iron Man armor, but a lot of audiences were very, let's say, unsatisfied with the fact that the movie's called Iron Man and we didn't get a lot of Iron Man in the movie. I think that would be the same kind of stretch they would have a little bit with a movie that tried to focus too much on Clark. But I believe the weaknesses of the movie aside, Superman Returns shows us that you can very much have Superman and have us as an audience more identify with him and understand struggle, the whole idea of struggle as Superman rather than as Clark. I think that's possible. Easy? No. Possible? Yes. So that's kind of my take on that, Nicholas. Thanks for sharing that, man. All right, next up. We only have time for a couple more here, guys. Wakandan Forever writes, yeah, John, that's right. You know where the money is. Wakandan vibranium goes a long way. Seriously. On behalf of all the Wakandans and the film fan community as a whole, you're welcome, and thank you for giving us a great show to look forward to. Well, thank you so much for that, man. I appreciate that. It's always cool when people just want to write and say something kind. I appreciate that, man. Thank you. And vibranium would be worth a lot on the market today. Way more than Bitcoin. All right, Sergeant Ward writes, hey, John, hope you're having a great day. Hypothetically, if the DGA, SAG, that's SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, and the WGA, that's the Writers Guild of America, decide to leave Warner, what will they do for talent? Will they hire the director of Sharknado to make Batman starring some random underwear model? What do you think will happen? No, listen. So where this is all coming from is, of course, Warner Brothers making their announcement that all their 2021 films were going to go straight to HBO Max. This pissed off everybody in the industry. Because it was Warner Brothers, first of all, acting like sniveling little cowards, keeping it secret and not even telling people that they were going to do this. They kept it a secret from everybody, including the people who paid for the movies, their production partners, their talent partners. They kept it a secret from everybody and just dropped this bomb on everyone. So they totally mishandled it. But they also pissed off very specifically the directors. There has been talk in the New York Times reported that the Directors Guild of America is talking about boycotting Warner Brothers. That's all directors. Not literally every single director on the planet, but for the most part, if the DGA says none of our members are going to direct any of your movies, that's pretty much all the directors. Pretty much. And where it really becomes problematic is quite often the Screen Actors Guild, the actors, and pretty much every actor belongs to SAG, and the Writers Guild may join them. If that were to happen, Warner Brothers is completely effed. Nobody will make their movies. They'll have nobody to make movies. Nobody who's a member of the Directors Guild will direct it. Nobody who's in the Screen Actors Guild will appear in their films, and no members of the Writers Guild of America will write their films. They'd be totally screwed. Warner Brothers knows this, and that's why it'll never happen. Warner Brothers will do what they need to do behind the scenes. They will make deals. They will make compromises. They will come up with a way to make this all work because they cannot allow that to happen. They cannot allow the DGA to boycott them. And so they will make whatever deal they need to make with the DGA, make whatever compromise they need to make with the DGA and others to ensure that that does not happen. So I would be shocked, absolutely shocked, if we woke up next week to find out that the DGA was indeed boycotting Warner Brothers films. I cannot believe for 1 second that Warner Brothers would let it come to that. They'll make whatever deal they need to. They'll compromise wherever they'll need to. They will come to an agreement with the DGA. Just like they are coming to an agreement with Legendary. If the Legendary lawsuit ever went to court, Warner Brothers would lose on day one of the case. And everybody knows that. Warner Brothers knows that. And because they know that, because they know they would lose that case to Legendary, they are making a deal with Legendary. They're negotiating one-on-one with Legendary. It sounds like, although from what I understand it's not finalized, the results of the Legendary negotiations is going to be, okay, Dune goes to an exclusively theatrical model, and Godzilla will go to HBO Max still, but we'll pay you, Legendary, $250 million to allow us to put Godzilla vs. Kong on HBO Max. Because they have to. They have to make a deal. They can't let that go to court because they will lose because they have contracts that they violated. So, and I believe the same thing with the DGA situation. Yes, it could be a nuclear option. It would be cataclysmic for Warner Brothers if that happened. And that is why Warner Brothers will make sure it doesn't happen. They will make whatever deal they need to make. So I think, we can talk about that doomsday scenario, but the reality is calmer heads will prevail. They will not allow it to come to that. They won't allow it to come to that. At least I'd be shocked if they did. I'd be totally shocked if they did. Thanks for writing that in, Sergeant. All right, next up, Sergeant also writes, hey, John, did you hear that Sony is benefiting from the HBO Max deal? They say that directors are turning to them to make movies. Makes sense since they have no streaming service. Will they become the new creator-friendly studio? Could Nolan make movies for them? Well, Nolan can make movies with whoever he wants. When Nolan first came out and was so angry at Warner Brothers, I said, you know what, guys? I still believe that Christopher Nolan will make films with Warner Brothers. I think they're having a disagreement. Christopher Nolan's very upset right now, but Warner Brothers will make Christopher Nolan happy. Christopher Nolan will remember that all of his great films he's made with Warner Brothers, the successful ones he's made with Warner Brothers. And at the end of the day, I believe calmer heads will prevail, and you'll see Christopher Nolan making films with Warner Brothers again. I'm not so sure that's true anymore. I think I was wrong. I'm not so confident anymore that we're ever going to see Christopher Nolan make a movie with Warner Brothers again. I certainly don't think we're going to see Denis Villeneuve. I mean, if you read that article, Denis Villeneuve, the director of Dune, wrote in Variety, I don't think he sounds like a guy who has any plans to work with Warner Brothers again. It sounds like he burned all those bridges. I mean, he had no intention of crossing that bridge again. So now I don't know anymore. Listen, directors wanted to work with Sony already. Directors want to work with whatever studio is going to let them make their movies. It's just that simple, right? It's not like, let's say, I don't know, let me pick let's say Edgar Wright. It's not like Edgar Wright is, I'll only ever make movies with Sony. Because I believe he did, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he did Baby Driver with Sony. It's not like Edgar Wright is like, I'll only ever make movies with Sony. No, he'll make movies with whatever studio wants to let him make movies. I mean, that's the way it goes. So I believe studios were already looking to work with Sony. Sony can only make so many movies. They can only make so many movies. So I don't know, but maybe Sony, because for the longest time, Warner Brothers was seen as the place for creators. And that was sometimes a bad thing. That worked against them when it came to the DCEU at first, because instead of having one controlling hand like Kevin Feige overseeing the whole universe, they were just letting directors do whatever they wanted to do, which was creating kind of a chaotic mess. But Warner Brothers was seen in the industry for decades as kind of like being the creators studio. That's where they treat the directors right, you know? And now it's not looked at that anymore. Now you got Christopher Nolan writing, filmmakers went to bed thinking they worked for the best movie studio, but they woke up finding out that they worked for the worst streaming company. Them some harsh words. So I don't know whether that directly benefits Sony or anybody else. Who knows? But I think directors were willing to work with Sony before that anyway. All right. Francis writes, hey, John, knowing your love of dogs and that you are a fan of great demonstrations of friendship and loyalty in movies, I was wondering if you've ever seen Hachi, A Dog's Tale from 2009 starring Richard Gere, and what you think of it. Never even heard of it. Never even heard of it. Let me just look up here. Let me bring it up. Hachi, A Dog's Tale. Let me see if I can find it here. Hachir, it's spelt weird. Hachi, A Dog's Tale. Okay, there it is. On IMDb, it's from 2009, just like you said. Joan Allen was in it too. As a matter, Jason Alexander, Kramer from Seinfeld, was in there as well. A college professor bonds with an abandoned dog. Let me see if I can bring this up here. Why is that not coming up? Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can fix this. Here we go. Okay. A college professor bonds with an abandoned dog he takes into his home. What an adorable poster. Look at that poster. Look at that little cutie. And of course, yeah, also starring Joan Allen. Haven't seen Richard Gere do a lot. No, I can tell you right now, I've never even heard of the film. I've never even heard of this film. So no, I have no, but thanks for putting on my radar, Francis. I appreciate that. Okay. Next up, John's Purple Lightsaber, who writes, I agree with your thoughts on Cavill not aging out of Superman, but I do wonder about if he'll be 007 after Craig. He'd have that and The Witcher, both taking months to film. Granted, 007 isn't yearly like TV, but I do think it's an interesting scenario. Honestly, here's the thing. A lot of people overestimate how much time an actor spends on a project. Like they think if a movie takes a year to make, that the actor was there for a year doing it. Normally, under most regular circumstances, an actor works like 6 to 8 weeks on a movie. 6 to 8 weeks. For shooting a series like, say, Witcher, probably more like 4 months. Probably more like 4 months of shooting for Henry Cavill on that. The reality is they have plenty of time. Doing a season of something, especially now that we live in an era where most shows don't have 22 episode seasons, they have 8 episodes or whatever. You can do 3 movies and a season of a show if it's one of these 8 to 10 episode season things. An actor, if they really want to do, could do that. Doing a Superman movie and a James Bond movie and 1 season of The Witcher, that's actually not all that hard. I mean, and really, that you're probably talking about 6 months of commitment, maybe 8 months of commitment right there, maybe 9, maybe 10, with 2 full months off. And I'm not saying it's not difficult and it's not hard, but yeah, you can do that. A full-time working actor can do a Superman movie, a James Bond movie in 1 season of a show like Witcher. If it's a shorter show, I think they can do that no problem. Now, will Henry Cavill be the new 007? For a long time, I thought he was the logical choice. Not only because him being great, but he was the runner-up to play James Bond when they cast Daniel Craig. A lot of people don't realize that or know that. Henry Cavill, if for whatever reason it didn't work out with Daniel Craig and they decided against Daniel Craig for whatever reason, Henry Cavill was going to be our James Bond. Same thing happened with Henry Cavill playing Superman. Henry Cavill was runner-up to play Superman in Superman Returns. That Brandon Routh ultimately got the job in. And so when they needed Superman again, they went to Henry Cavill. And I could totally see that happening with James. He would be a great James Bond. He would be a wonderful James Bond. But I don't know. I used to feel really strongly that he would be the James Bond. I'm feeling less and less sure about that. But anyway, if he were the new James Bond and he continues to be Superman and he's in Witcher, it's actually not that crazy for him to do it. It's actually not all that terribly crazy or difficult to do it. So anyway, that's my take on that. Okay. Last question of the day, guys, because after this, I think we're caught up to the questions that we had come in before the end of Friday's episode of the John Campea Show. So I think we're ready to go at that point. Hulk Hogan, I'm coming for you, writes, there is more than one sort of prison, Captain. I sense that you carry yours wherever you go. John, I am so excited to see just how many, how grimy the rebellion can get in the Andor series. Rogue One is my 3rd favorite Star Wars movie. So safe to say that I am hyped. I'm very excited for Cassian Andor. I'm very excited for it. The whole idea about looking at that darker... Listen, if you're going to have a rebellion, hands are going to get bloodied. There's going to be some unsavory things that need to get done in order to have a rebellion. And one of the things that I loved about Rogue One, and Rogue One is my 2nd favorite Disney era Star Wars film. One of the things I loved about it was the fact that Cassian Andor, we saw it with that guy that he actually gives up to be killed. We saw elements of that, listen, if you're going to have a rebellion, it's not everybody just standing around in pristine strategy areas being all noble. Some people have to get their hands bloody and some dirty deeds have to get done. And to have a character like Cassian Andor to explore that side of it, I think is going to be really fun. Now, I'm not usually big on prequel stories and all that kind of stuff, but this is such a different angle of the Star Wars universe that they're going to look at that we've never really looked at before this way, that I'm willing to kind of overlook the prequel nature of it. But still, yeah, I'm looking forward to Hogan. I am very much looking forward to it too. All right, everything from a guy who's great in bed to Anonymous and Alpha Kevin and onwards. Hey guys, we're going to get to your questions on tomorrow's John Campea Show. We will start off our live comments and questions part of the show with your questions. So keep your eyes open for that. That's what we'll get to. All right, guys. That'll do it for this installment of the Companion Videos. Thank you so much for being here and spending part of your day with us. Don't forget the John Campea Show will return tomorrow. That's on Monday, January the 4th, which will be me and Robert Meyer Burnett talking about a whole bunch of things. I hope you guys decide to join us. And guys, please do remember, I know there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but things are really bad right now with the pandemic. So please continue to do the 4 main things. Stay smart, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and please take care of the people around you. That'll do it for me for now, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. My name's John Campea, and until next time, my friends, bye-bye.